Artificial intelligence, which started in the 1940s, but in 1956, it was given a chance to become an academic research. And now we're going to talk about the self-driving cars and the importance of self-driving cars, not just in South Africa, but all over the world. And we've got a few discrepancies that we also want to discuss, Wanda, here on the show as we talk about this issue of self-driving cars. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we need to actually lay down everything and also the foundation in terms of where it started and what are the differences between the traditional driving cars and self-driving cars, and what are the advantages really?
Okay, so I'll start with the differences and the advantages. Yeah. So self-driving cars are said to be a bit more safer.
Self-driving cars are now a reality. Take a look around. Cars are already driving themselves on the roads of California, Texas, Arizona, Washington, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and many other cities. Though currently, they are restricted to specific test areas and driving conditions.
Because of the tech inside them.
Is it?
As opposed to, but that's still to be proved.
Okay, because that's what
proved.
I'm asking, is it? Yeah, could you?
They're supposed to be, once they're fully self-driving, safer. But there are issues with that as well, which we'll discuss a little bit later. They're also supposed to be more advanced in technology because of what makes them self-driving.
Yeah.
But other than that, in terms of the mechanical aspects, they still run the same way. They still have, depending on if it's an electric car or if it's a turbine engine, still has the same type of engines and things like that.
Well, I like what you said when you said they're supposed to be safe, because I've seen recently that by 2021 September, the BMW 750iX could only self-drive for 100 kilometers. And then after that, and still within those 100 kilometers, it still needs human supervision. And we're going to talk about also the Mercedes-Benz and Tesla, which has got a few discrepancies here and there. But what are the advantages? You've mentioned that they're supposed to be safe, but now what are the advantages in terms of that safety that you've mentioned?
Okay, so some of the advantages in terms of safety, we're looking at collision detection. So if we look at cars nowadays, like cars that are advanced in technology, they're able to detect when you're distracted, for instance, while you're driving, or when a vehicle in front of you is acting in a way that's unsafe. So that's one of the safety things that are supposed to be the advantage of self-driving cars opposed to traditional cars. But one thing I would like to mention is that self-driving cars haven't been yet perfected. So all these safety features that are supposed to make them better than the average car aren't fully perfected. They are being tested, but they just haven't been, they haven't reached that sweet spot.
Self-driving cars are now a reality. Take a look around. Cars are already driving themselves on the roads of California, Texas, Arizona, Washington, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and many other cities. Though currently, they are restricted to specific test areas and driving conditions. But how exactly do they work? Just like humans, they also face issues of traffic congestion, rash driving, potholes, trees, and other obstacles on the road. But again, how do they change lanes, keep a safe distance from other vehicles passing by, and how do they identify roadblocks? Let's take a closer look at how they handle such situations smoothly.
Okay, so my next question is based on what you just said also, because if you need human supervision, let's say for 100 or 200 kilometers, and I know that Tesla is a bit, advanced than the Bavarian Motor Works, and I wanted to mention this because BMW is an abbreviation for that, and Mercedes-Benz, so they can only drive for 100 and maximum of 200, but Tesla can drive even more further. Still with the human supervision, However, the ethical considerations around the self-driving cars now is another issue, because I've seen also recently that people have put something and a car could not detect that it was a human being. So Can you please dwell on the considerations ethically?
Sure. So ethically speaking, self-driving cars, in terms of the technology that is used to develop them, has limitations.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest issues and one of the reasons why we haven't seen self-driving cars being developed and implemented on a large scale in different nations is because of the ethical questions that lie within self-driving cars. So one of the big questions is actually related to the example you just gave, is deciding not only if the object in front of it is human or not, but then on what steps it should take if the object is human. So does it then risk the life of the driver or the pedestrian on the street is one of the reasons why self-driving cars haven't been fully rolled out, because it's a difficult moral question to answer, and depending on who you ask, the answer is different, right?
Yeah.
You might ask someone on the street and they'd say, no, don't take my life, the person driving the car. But then if you ask the person driving the car, they might say they're more valuable.
Yeah.
So then how do we then decide whose life to save?
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why, in terms of development and safety, that we haven't seen so much being done with self-driving cars.
February 27th, 2021. Police body cam footage shows a traffic stop on a highway in Montgomery County, Texas.
Hey, how's it going?
As this 2019 Tesla Model X driving in autopilot mode strikes their vehicles at 54 miles per hour, injuring 5 officers and hospitalizing the subject of the original traffic stop.
Here, roll up. 1, 2, 3.
The crash is one of 16 between Teslas and emergency vehicles being investigated by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, to determine whether Tesla's autopilot has contributed to the accidents. The Journal obtained exclusive dashcam footage and partial data logs from the Tesla in the Texas crash. We annotated the footage for clarity. These materials show the car's autopilot system failed to recognize the stopped emergency vehicles in time. And though its driver monitoring system appears to have worked as designed, it was not enough to sideline the impaired driver and prevent the collision. We also obtained 8 crash reports included in the NHTSA investigation. In at least 6, the incidents occurred when emergency vehicle lights were flashing. NHTSA declined to comment on an ongoing investigation, and Tesla did not respond to requests for comment. The driver in the Texas crash begins his 45-minute trip just before 12:30 a.m. He is intoxicated, according to police reports. The police investigation notes several instances when he swerves in his lane. About 4 minutes into his drive, the logs show he sets the car on autopilot at a speed of 64 miles per hour. Tesla's autopilot is a system that partially automates many driving tasks on highways, including steering, braking, and lane changes. Drivers using autopilot are supposed to remain engaged so they can take control of the car at any time. Federal investigators have said Tesla's marketing, including the name autopilot, exaggerates its capabilities and encourages drivers to misuse the technology. The autopilot system for a 2019 Model X, the model in the Texas crash, judged whether the driver was alert based on whether their hands were on the wheel. If the system did not detect hands on the wheel, the driver received an alert. If the driver didn't respond, autopilot would disengage. The driver in the Texas crash receives one of these alerts less than 2 minutes after engaging autopilot, according to the car's logs. And he complies. He receives 2 more in the next minute and complies. In fact, he receives and complies with 150 of these alerts over the course of this 45-minute drive. By the design of Tesla's driver monitoring system, the driver was paying enough attention to operate the vehicle in autopilot. This year and model of Tesla uses a combination of radar and camera technology to recognize objects in all directions. Autonomous vehicle experts say the radar can easily recognize moving vehicles, but that it has difficulty distinguishing stationary obstacles, leaving it mainly up to the cameras to detect them. Around 15 minutes into the drive, the logs indicate the technology is working. It recognizes a vehicle about 120 yards ahead. Then again, about 35 minutes into the drive, the Tesla sees a vehicle as it merges 70 yards ahead and tracks it as it drives off. About 45 minutes in, the Tesla approaches emergency vehicles on the side of the road. Autopilot is not designed to identify them as obstacles because they're not in the lane, but an attentive driver would typically know to slow down or change lanes. Around the same time, the driver receives his 150th warning to keep his hands on the wheel. He complies, but it's not enough to get him to respond to the stopped vehicles. Seconds later, other police cars are visibly blocking the lane, but the logs show no sign that the Tesla sees them. Experts in autonomous vehicle safety who reviewed the crash footage say there's a difference between the way the car's camera sees an ordinary vehicle and an emergency vehicle. The police car's flashing lights created a hazy image that the car's software likely did not recognize as a stopped vehicle. The logs indicate that the car finally recognized something in its path, just 2.5 seconds and 37 yards before the crash. Autopilot attempts to slow the car and ultimately disengages. But at 54 miles per hour, it is too late. The 5 officers injured in the crash are suing Tesla, claiming that the autopilot feature was responsible for the accident. An attorney for the officers declined to comment. Tesla denies the lawsuit's allegations and claims the fault lies with the driver. The driver did not respond to attempts to contact him. In 2021, after repeated recommendations from federal investigators, Tesla began using internal cameras to monitor driver attentiveness. But safety experts continue to find flaws in its design, and drivers still find ways to fool the system. The same year, Tesla also issued a software update that was designed to improve Autopilot's ability to detect emergency vehicles. Though one of the crashes NHTSA is investigating occurred after these updates. The government has now expanded its investigation beyond crashes with emergency vehicles and is investigating the overall effectiveness of Tesla's Autopilot system.
I think, them coming into the market is actually posing a danger, when it comes to, let's say, the taxi industry and other markets out there. Because if there are self-driving cars, why else, if you become comfortable with that, why else would you go for a taxi if a self-driving car can take you to wherever you want to go? But also, there are levels, I think there's standards that, they need to reach. Like, I know there's from level 0 to 6, they have to be approved of those. If they cannot reach level 6 or, beyond level 6, then they can't be on the streets. However, Waymo, it's an American automobile manufacturer as well, and BMW were approved back in 2020 and 2021. And others, like Honda, was approved to actually sell legally, do you understand, in Japan. So it says a lot about the market that is now targeting and the dangers and all those fears when it comes to the taxi industry or the transport industry at large.
We cannot say that there are no dangers involved. There are no risks for taxi drivers or e-hailing drivers in that sense. But it also depends highly on the country. So if you're an e-hailing driver in the States, for instance, then there is a bit of a concern, there is quite a risk, because there are states like Arizona and I believe New York and a few others where self-driving cars are being used for taxi services. So we are seeing that there are people who are losing jobs as a result of self-driving cars. But then if you bring it home, if you bring it local, it's highly unlikely that within the next 5 years we will see self-driving cars taking over.
What are you trying to say about our country? Is it still developing or is it developed already? Wow,
It's all dependent on the market.
Yeah.
We don't really have that huge of a market for self-driving cars in this country yet.
As the true difficulty of achieving autonomous driving has become apparent, some companies have simply given up on it altogether, with both Uber and Lyft selling their self-driving divisions. The biggest issue facing all the companies is safety, because the technology has to be 99.99999% safe. And while the first 1 or 2 of those nines may have been achieved, there are more to go. And unfortunately, each step gets significantly harder thanks to the sheer number of variables that need computing. There are 5 levels of automation before full driving automation is achieved. Honda and Mercedes-Benz say they have been certified at level 3. But still, after a decade of work, most companies, including Tesla, are only at level 2. And this is what can happen under level 2 automation.
Okay.
Because there's still a lot of risks involved in developing and implementing self-driving cars. And because if you look at it, a lot of the components within a self-driving car are electric. And electrical problems do occur quite often. So, and as South Africans, people are very skeptical of such.
You're reminding me, when you talk about electric, issues, we were dealing with something called load shedding now.
Right.
I was thinking last time that, okay, what happens when you buy an electric car? What if there's no electricity? Why are you going to charge it? And people are laughing. I'm like, but that's the fact. That's the case. You're not going to charge it anyway up until electricity comes back. Yeah, that's an issue right there. But we're going to discuss more on that after this time out. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking about self-driving cars and the issue of artificial intelligence. Wanda, really, I mean, it's something that I thought I had to do today, because we have so many assumptions around this topic, and I'm glad we finally addressed it and we got it out of the way. So what is the government of South Africa? Should there be any chances that we have self-driving cars in South Africa? What do you think would be the laws around that, or the government?
Laws that should be looked into, laws that actually should be looked into in terms of self-driving cars is the ethical laws. I don't want to take it back, but that's really the biggest issue in terms of self-driving cars is whoever's programming it, what are their ethical inclinations? Are they more likely to risk the life of the driver and the passengers within the vehicle as opposed to the life of, let's say, a 5-year-old child running on the street? So they would have to really take consideration into who's programming that car, what are their moral inclinations, what do they care about? Do they care more about their customers, which is their source of money, or do they care about the people of the country? So they'd have to put in laws that favor everyone involved, not just the producer of the car, but also the citizens. So that's something to consider. They'd also have to look into the technology we use at our traffic lights, for instance. If we look at a country like the States, the traffic lights there are timed. But also, if you arrive at a red light, let's say, and you stop on a pressure point, it can trick the timer into reducing the time at which that you stay at the traffic light. So they'd have to look into how our laws are governed in terms of our traffic lights, our four-way stops, our everyone involved in the production of the car. It's a lot that they'd have to consider. It's a lot that they'd have to consider.
So let's talk about data collection when it comes to self-driving cars. How can data be collected in terms of that, and how, because we're still talking about how to self-driving cars self-drive without human supervision. So how can data be collected in that?
Specifically for South Africa or just
South
in
Africa.
general?
Should there be any chance that we have self-driving cars in South Africa? How would we do in terms of data collection, considering the sensors and everything?
That's an interesting question. A good way is a very rudimentary way is is still through human input.
Okay.
You might have noticed a rotating device installed on top of this autonomous vehicle. Sometimes these devices are mounted on the bonnet. This device is called LiDAR. It acts as the eye of the self-driving vehicle, providing a 360-degree view of its surroundings in order to enable safe driving. Continuously rotating LiDAR system sends thousands of laser pulses every second. These pulses collide with the various objects around the vehicle and reflect back the signals. These light reflections are then used to create a 3D point cloud. An onboard computer records each laser's reflection point and translates this rapidly updating point cloud into an animated 3D representation. The 3D representation is created by measuring the speed of light and the distance covered by it, which helps to determine the vehicle's position with respect to the objects surrounding it. The 3D representation also monitors the distance between the vehicles that pass by and any other vehicle in front. It also helps to command the brakes in order to slow down or stop the vehicle. When the road ahead is clear, it can also allow the vehicle to speed up. LiDAR is also being incorporated into another development called pre-scan. In pre-scan, laser scans the road surface several hundred times a second. This information is then fed to the car's onboard computer and processed in a fraction of a second, which adjusts the individual suspension for each wheel of the vehicle. With this, autonomous cars achieve the smoothest and safest ride possible. The technology helps wheels and tires avoid imperfections on the road surface and warns the vehicle about obstacles and potholes so that they can provide bump-free rides to their passengers.
It's still through human input. For now, that's quite, self-driving cars are quite reliant on human input in every aspect.
We're not exempted from human supervision.
Not at all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right. Anything you want to say about self-driving cars? I want to ask you before we close. The education on self-driving cars also, how to educate people if maybe the country is not really there yet or ready to bring any self-driving cars? Because I know in America it's a great deal, and public transport, part of it is self-driving cars. In Japan it's been approved and they can sell legally, do you understand? So in South Africa we don't have such yet as of now. What education can we bring to people of South Africa concerning this? Should they consider?
Thank you. Look, self-driving cars are great. We should definitely look into it. But if you are, as a South African, thinking of acquiring a self-driving car, you have to look at the safety aspects behind it. If you look at Teslas, there are issues behind them. If you look at BMWs, there are all sorts of issues with every car manufacturer that is manufacturing self-driving cars. So first, consider the safety reasons behind why they're being implemented. And also, we'd have to think about why are we going self-driving as opposed to traditional cars. At the moment, is there really that big of a need? You could say yes, if you look at the number of collisions that we have in the country, especially towards the end of the year. But then with that being said, that doesn't mean that self-driving cars will reduce that, because the technology in them hasn't advanced to a point where we can confidently say that they are safer. So I'd highly recommend that the safety aspect of self-driving cars be researched well before anyone decides.
In order to solve full self-driving properly, you have to solve real-world AI.
So far, nobody in any field is close to solving real-world AI. Simple things like driving at night or rain can bamboozle an automated car's computer system. All the information the car will need to drive safely has to be learned by its computer. This is why Tesla is using over 100,000 ordinary drivers to effectively teach its evolving software how to drive in the real world. These drivers are helping to identify edge cases, the type of problems that rarely occur, but that require special handling by the computer. Like here, when the car sees the red Wells Fargo banner on the side of the building, interprets it as a stop sign, and mistakenly engages the brakes. The problem is, in the real world, there are almost endless possibilities for what a car might be faced with. So even if you teach a car to avoid a cow in the road, it might not take the same action if it meets a sheep.
Yeah.
That's the car for me.
Yeah, because I think considering discrepancies, of course, that come with self-driving car issues. The fact that, you know, the sensor, it has to sense what's in front of it and also the ability to drive itself. So I think really there needs to be a lot of education around self-driving cars as well. Wanda, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
That's all we have for you today. So from me and Nomava and the rest of the crew behind the scenes, it's a goodbye for now and God bless.